Hello, everybody. Welcome back to All Our Parts. I am so excited for my guest today. She is a podcast wizard. She is also my podcast coach. She does all things podcast strategy, business strategy, the skills that she offers to the table, transferable. So excited, Chelsea. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm so excited to be here and how full circle that we're having a conversation on your podcast, which was an idea a few years ago, and now you have taken it to the moon. So I am so happy that we're doing this.
Yes, I've been reflecting on that, and I'm like, I literally came to Chelsea with a thought and a dream. Like a pen, a dream, and a hope. And she walked me through the steps, and it is so amazing to now be sitting in front of you, being able to interview you.
I love this. This is like full circle manifestation moment for me too.
So you have been really bringing yourself to social media, decentering men, talking about your consumption journey. Is this like a rebrand era?
Okay, definitely a rebrand era. I also realize that I think everyone feels this that at some point you don't want to be a brand, you want to be a human being and you want to show that you have a personality outside of what your offer suite is. And so I think that's always been a piece of my brand, but lately I'm leaning more into sharing really who I am and what I believe in and trying to show my values even more because I want to magnetize people that resonate with those values and I want to repel people that don't. So yeah, with the consumption journey, with decentering men, with all these new things, it is like a stage and phase that I'm going through myself and I want to be able to share that with people so they can see how my inner world also reflects my outer world. That being said, I am literally going through a rebrand right now and it will probably publish later this year. And yeah, I'm really leaning into the author, speaker, consultant, philosopher versus a podcast coach or someone that can help you with the skills of podcasting. I really want to show that I am someone who am thinking more like building a body of work and
Mhm.
legacies and helping people do that versus I think the era I was in before, maybe switching out of right now is I just help you launch podcasts, which has been amazing, but I've been doing that for 5 years and I think I'm ready for a little bit of a pivot.
Yeah, I've noticed in the last year you've allowed yourself to be like a multifaceted business icon, like
Thank
Substack,
you.
the vlogs.
I need to bring him back. I was just talking to my friend this morning because I recorded those blogs in Berlin. She's moving to Berlin. And I'm like, do I need to go back there? Because I was in my vlog era in Berlin and it was so much fun. But yeah, I've just had a lot of experimentation in the last year vlogs, writing, essays. I've always been a creator. And I feel like the way you can tell me, because you're not me, the way I perceive myself is like, people were just seeing me as podcast coach, or podcast host because I've had my podcast, but I'm like, I'm also a writer. I can vlog, I can do all these other things, and I not even can do them. I want to do them. I really like creating, and I want to lean into that unbound self expression and not be so confined to I'm a podcast coach, so I can only podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when you released your episode on women just releasing their inner witch, like allowing their voices and taking up space as not only a birthright, but like a corrective, like healing experience. And I remember listening that and was like, okay, she's like dipping her toe into something like new, something fun.
Hmm.
I remember I was walking my dog. I was like, I love this episode. And to see it now evolve and grow into something is just so amazing.
I'm so happy to hear that. And what I will tell you too is, like you said, dipping my toe into that is an experience that I'm trying to share more publicly. And that is something that can be hard for people, right? If they're not an expert in it or they're just
Mhm.
starting out or the beginning. And my experience right now in going into these waters is very new. And it's not things that I normally talk about, but this is why I constantly talk about pivoting in public and sharing your journey because exactly what you're telling me, someone's going to resonate with it, even if you don't have all the bells and whistles ready to go and you don't have a thesis on it yet, you can still show like I'm opening the door. So that really validates what I was experiencing in that moment, that I am opening the door and I want to keep going into the living room, so to speak.
Yeah. Has any imposter syndrome come up as you've been exploring these new or more authentic like ways of presenting?
Oh, absolutely. If we use the decentering men and like witch wound example, I have always been interested in stuff like that, but I've never studied it. I've just heard it on podcasts or read it in emails, but I've never studied like feminism and the rise and the waves of feminism and like the witch hunts and the trials and all these things. So when I started sharing about it, I did have imposter syndrome of should I have gone to women's studies courses or
Mm.
taken some more, yeah, I don't know, knowledge before I started just jumping into this topic. For everyone that doesn't know, I actually have a broadcast journalism degree. So I went to school to learn how to report, and a big thing was fact checking. We're not just throwing things up because we want to say them, it's fact checking. So I have this piece of me that has like journalistic integrity of I should probably fact check that this happened on this date and that what I'm saying is really true, that the witch hunts led to this and that and the other thing. So when I did that episode, I did start to have a little imposter syndrome where I'm like, what if people that have really studied women's studies and feminism start being like, this is wrong, or I don't really know what argument you're trying to make. And I think where the imposter syndrome came from was like feeling like I didn't have an academic angle to what I
Mm.
was talking about. I thrive in academia. Like I was a star student, I have my master's degree, I love education. And I think that started to poke at me a little bit of who are you to be talking about this stuff? You don't know what you're talking about. You didn't study this. And the way I was able to navigate that was just I'm not trying to write a thesis statement on this. I'm actually trying to share what you just said, the healing of the witch wound and how we can actually rectify things that have happened in the past by using our voice now. And that was more of the argument I was trying to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about one of your episodes of In My Non-Expert Opinion, where you discuss the duality that you experienced in your education, going to a huge party school, having fun, having those undergrad years, and then going to a prestigious graduate program, getting your master's degree, and then transferring into corporate. It allowed you to experience both sides. And there's that corporate idea of what makes a person an expert. It's a question you pose all the time. And we
Yes.
always have to come back to our experience, and you as a woman sharing your voice on the airwaves, being able to amplify other women's voices. That is the healing, and that gets to be the experience too.
I'm so happy you said that and it landed. And I want everyone to know too, the reason my podcast is called In My Non-Expert Opinion was because I had all those fears when I started out is I'm not an expert. I don't have that formal degree in every single thing I talk about. I have a lot of opinions. They're not all coming from an industry thought leader, but I want to talk about them. And so I was like, why don't I just be on the nose with the podcast name and call it In My Non-Expert Opinion, the same way a doctor would say, in my expert opinion, you should go on this medication. I was going to be like, in my non-expert opinion, you could try doing this and this. So I think it's important for anyone listening that if you feel you don't have the degree or the expertise or no one is asking you to write a thesis paper on this. No one is saying you have to have a PhD in order to put your voice on the airwaves. And that has really been an undertone of my mission is making sure that people don't feel like they need to have 25 degrees before they share their work online.
Yeah, I think that goes back to even when we're thinking about consumption, when we're thinking about how we as a society are starting to choose the people we elevate. There's a level of relatability that so many people are looking for. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about Gabby Wendy's rise to fame from Traders. Like she's bringing a level of authenticity, a level of just relax. She's not showing off with like biggest brands. She's not doing a whole lot of brand deals. She's just showing up as herself, and the people are loving it.
Is this the girl that her podcast is called Long Winded? Okay. I remember finding her actually not even through her podcast, through her partner's podcast. And like it was one of those things, speaking of putting yourself in other people's orbits, which is what I've been talking about a lot, is I found her that way. And yeah, I remember just watching clips where I was like, she's just having fun and like telling stories, and it's so entertaining. And actually something we were just talking about right before we jumped on air was reducing inputs and like
Mhm.
canceling plans and slowing down. And I think that goes the same for self improvement. Not every podcast or piece of content we consume has to be constant progress and productivity. And I think Gabby's podcast is an excellent example of sometimes we just want to feel like we're listening in on girls chatting in the bathroom and that's it. And that's totally fine and valid.
Yeah, the world is heavy enough as it is. And so when you can, I think we are also starting to redefine the idea of what value is, especially when we think about experts, when we think about doctors. It's okay, how can we offer the most value? How can we really help move a person forward when slowing down, being intentional, being thoughtful about the lifestyle that you live, that is valuable. It's allowing hustle culture to not be the definition of success, which is really hard as Americans. And it's saying, actually,
Yes.
I'm adding value by reminding you to take a nap.
Yes. Literally just yesterday, I took this workshop called Ecofeminism in a Fractured World. And one of the biggest takeaways was that rest and slowing down is the resistance. And it's such a foreign concept and it sounds like a catchy tagline. But when you think about it, if our value is always put in the output that we can produce and the productivity levels that we have, we do start to think of ourselves as machines, but we're not machines. We're human
Hmm.
beings. We have emotions. We have seasons. As women, we have cycles. We go through cycles every month. And so to try to mimic more of nature's rhythms is something I'm really tuning into lately is, yeah, I don't want to be a constant 24/7 output machine. So yeah, taking a nap is resistance.
And that makes me want to shift gears a little bit because you are someone I think of as a lifestyle first career approach. When I say that, I mean being able to look at the lifestyle you want to cultivate and then modeling your career behind that and setting strategies, systems in place so that your career can support and sustain the lifestyle you ultimately want to live.
Yes, I love that phrase. I've never heard it phrased that way, like lifestyle first focus. And that is true. I think what really motivated me to do that was leaving corporate America. I was working 9 to 6. I was basically under surveillance when I was on my lunch break. Like people would time me. I remember one time I was 10 minutes late and someone was Slack messaging me, like, hey, is everything okay? I'm like, why? I'm in line at Chipotle. And they're like, okay, it's 1:10 and you left at 12. I was like, this is crazy. Like, I have to get out of this environment. And yeah, my work really gave me a lot of purpose and meaning, but it also, what we were just talking about, it's what I put all my value in. And so the only way I saw myself was a really good salesperson, a really good client facing employee, someone that hit their quota all the time. And I was just like, is this really what I want my life to be? And what happened was I went on a Euro trip during one of my PTO summer breaks. And I remember thinking, this is going to be the rest of your life. Like you are only going to get 10 to 12 days of PTO plus some bank holidays. There's no magical new land coming where you're all of a sudden going to get to take a month or two off. Like you're going to constantly have to bank your PTO. And that realization put me in like freeze mode for a second where I was like, this is going to be the rest of my life. So I eventually made the decision to leave corporate America and move to Australia. And I went there for a year. And I'm telling you, it is the exact opposite of American work culture. If
Mm.
anything, I had to adjust so much because I actually thought people were lazy there. I was like, wow, no one wants to work. Everyone's like leaving work at 4 p.m. to go surf, taking 2 hour lunch breaks. What's going on here? And I remember my one of my first jobs I had, it was part-time in Australia. We took a long lunch break and people were drinking wine and like laughing and taking their time and I'm like, guys, we have to get back, like we're gonna get in trouble. And they all looked at me like, no, we're not, we're fine, trust me, if we get our work done, we're totally okay. So I think living in Australia showed me the evidence that people do prioritize their lifestyle. Like
Mm.
even at the yoga studio I worked out for a little bit, I was handling some of their marketing. They would tell us, if you want to go take the 4 p.m. class and just make up your work tomorrow, please do that. And I was like, this seems all like a trap. Like, I feel like they're testing me and they're going to be like, oh, she ended up taking the break. But that's not what happened at all. People valued being outside in the sun, surfing, walking,
Mm.
Pilates. And it just showed me, like, wow, no one is tied up in their work or their title. No one talked about work on the weekend or their free time. No one cared. And I was just like, holy moly, there's a whole entire world that is focused on their lifestyle. So I
Yeah.
honestly think me going from corporate America and then jumping to the Australian lifestyle, it gave me the evidence that there was a new world that I could live in. And so when I started my business in Australia, that was something I was very cognizant of, is like, how can I keep this lifestyle without defaulting to my very American hustle ways? And it was a lot of trial and error, but eventually I got there. And that's now why I prioritize having my mornings to myself, taking in a lunch break however long I want, not
Mhm.
working 60-hour weeks. And it served me really well.
I want to ask you about that step between leaving corporate America and going into Australia because that's a big unknown. Like you said, having to deprogram the idea of what laziness is, what productivity is, but making that leap and saying, I am leaving everything here in America and I'm going to learn a new culture, new lifestyle, be surrounded by new people. What was that in between process like?
Ooh, that's such a good question because, yeah, I hate when people are like, I just quit and got a one-way ticket and never looked back. And you're like, what happened in between that? So I will say, for one, it was not all at once. It wasn't like 1 week I decided to quit and 2 weeks later I was on a plane. I think the process was probably a year and a half, and I knew I needed to give myself that time to adjust. So I applied for the visa. I got it immediately. It's very easy to get the visa in Australia, the working holiday one, and you can wait a year to activate it. So I wanted to wait the year so I could save money. I didn't want to work when I got to Australia. I wanted to take a few months off. So that whole year that I was waiting gave me so much time to familiarize myself with Australia. So I was looking up neighborhoods to live in. I would literally Google Maps some neighborhoods and try to see the views.
Hmm.
I was looking up Instagrams. I was watching YouTube videos of nomads that lived in Australia just to try to get some type of feeling of what the culture was like. So that really helped. And then I was still working in corporate America, and I will tell you, I was terrified of quitting. I thought they were going to come to my house, burn it down, put me at the stake. Like, I don't know what I was thinking. And I think this is how a lot of people in corporate America feel, is your coworkers become your family. And you see these people every day for 40 to 60 hours. They become your friends. You hang out on the weekends. Now all of a sudden you're their bridesmaids. You're going to their bachelorette parties. Like, you do become best friends. At least I became really good friends with a lot of my coworkers. So for some weird reason, and I think this is part of the insidious nature of American corporate life, is you feel like you're abandoning people when you're quitting. Actually kept me stuck for a little bit. Like, I remember I was like, I'm just going to quit in May and then save the summer in Florida and then go to Australia. And I was so scared. And I was like, no, I'm in the middle of this campaign. And like, it was always one more deal, one more week, one more this, one more that. And eventually I was like, okay, I have to get to Australia or this visa is going to expire. So I do remember being so nervous to tell my boss that I was quitting. I like almost threw up that morning. I cried on the call because I had the same reaction. I was like breaking up with someone. And I was like, this person's going to be pissed at me. They're going to retaliate. I'm going to get backlash. And I was like, that's so crazy now looking back, how I had the same nervous system reaction that I would during a breakup. So I was
Hmm.
terrified. And then I eventually ended up quitting. By the way, it was fine. They were like, okay, yep, makes sense. Like, at the end of the day, I am just a salesperson and I'm a number and they just need to backfill me. That's what a corporate business is. So then I moved home for a little bit to Florida, and that was an adjustment as well, because if anyone has moved home when they're an adult, you revert to being who you were when you lived at home when you were like 16 years old. So that was very interesting because I didn't know what to expect, and I was definitely uncomfortable. Like, I had lived in a nice apartment in Chicago, going to happy hour at rooftop bars, doing all these fun things, all of a sudden being like, can I use the car to go get groceries? And it was just such an interesting period. But the reason I did that was to save money too. So there was this element of discipline that I needed to have if I wanted to save and not work in Australia. The other thing I will say is I did have friends in Australia. So I actually met a few people through vacations, and I had a friend from college that lived there, and I was blowing them up. My friend from college, I was asking her a million things like, how expensive it is, like what's the cost of living, where should I live? Like she was my hotline to Australia. So I would say that support system, plus the friends that I had met on vacation and just the constant internet research I was doing, it acclimated me to what I could expect when I landed. I think that's really important for anyone that is uncomfortable with change. Is Yeah, change is unfamiliar, and so your nervous system is going to freak out. So I was trying to tell my nervous system, we already know what we're going into, at least 80%. You have friends there, and like worst case scenario, you stay a month, you hate it, and you can say at least I gave it a shot. So yeah, it was a lot of regulation time and a lot of patience. Again, I didn't just quit my job and run there. I think all in all it was a year and a half. And then having support systems there that could help me. As soon as I landed, I went to my friend from college's house. I hung out with her for a week. Then I saw my other friends who were constantly inviting me to places. So pretty quickly, I was integrated into like the Australian culture and community, and I didn't have to figure that out myself, which was incredible.
What an amazing reminder that huge shifts do not have to happen in one step. Like, we don't need to burn it all down. We don't need to make these more nervous system dysregulating choices by shifting and jumping into the life that we are craving, desiring, but we actually get to be really thoughtful about what that transition looks like. So often, social
Yes,
media sees the final product. We post the final product, the finish line, when we get to enjoy it. It gets to be its own journey. It doesn't have to be if I'm all in, then I need to literally go all in, dive in the
right.
deep end. You can like start in the baby pool first and work your way
I
in.
100% agree. My tagline for the longest time was like, baby steps are power moves. I took so many baby steps to get to Australia that by the time I landed, I wasn't freaking out. I was actually looking forward to it. I was like, I can't wait to run around Australia, where I have made the mistake of just jumping in and being like, woo, burn the ships. And then usually your nervous system freaks out and then you default to your old ways or old habits. And then you start to blame yourself or you start to make it mean something about you of, I guess I'm not a free spirit, or I guess I'm not as
Mhm.
adventurous as I thought. When in reality, it's like maybe you just needed to move a little bit slower to feel more oriented in where you were going.
That's what I always tell people when they ask about like my talking reels. They're like, "You love like posting talking reels. You're so good at it too." And I was like, "I used to walk in the park and record myself talking, and they would be like 2 minute and 30-second videos where I'm just yapping away, unposted. Like just me talking, seeing how to land content, even like building the podcast, like
Mhm.
baby steps. I tell people, I was like, it took me like 6 months, I think, to launch like my first episode. And, but I did, again, the nervous system regulation. Like, you don't need to go full force. You don't need to jump in, be all in, be super like intense about it. It gets to feel, you get to go at your own pace.
And I also think, reflecting on now, I haven't lived in America full time since 2019. That's a very American thing to like glamorize burning it all down and then overnight success. And like, I flew to the moon after this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, it's actually wild because I feel it when I'm around my American friends and back in America when I go visit, that there's this glamorization of like how fast you can get there and how intense you did it and how much energy and effort and output, and it's such a badge of honor, where when I live in Europe, Australia, even South America, no one cares. No one, everyone's cool. It's great. God, like cool for you. And I remember having a hard time with that because I did have a lot of value in like how fast I could do things and how
Mm-hmm.
intense I could get it done. And again, I think a lot of us measure ourselves on how fast you can get something done because that is a very capitalistic shining star, is how productive you can be. So that was again a massive adjustment in Australia, a huge adjustment in Europe, and even in Cape Town. It's just so funny. No one talks about how fast they move or how quick they got there or their work. It's only when I'm back in America because that is so much of what we've built our pride and self perception on. But to your point, it's like, for what? That's what I
Yeah.
always think, is for what? Like, I just remember there was this coach, I listened to her podcast, and she did have this rags to riches story of, I made my first million in 11 months or something. And I think that message is obviously very hot and glamorous, right? I want to make a million in 11 months. But it was like, okay, and what? You don't win the Nobel Peace Prize for becoming a millionaire in 11 months. You don't become like a better person in the world because you became a millionaire in 11 months. Like it's just another stat and metric that we try to hit and race. And then usually what happens is when you get there, you're like, okay, now what? Now I need to make 2 million in 10 months. I need to make 3 million in 5 months. And the goalpost is always moving. So it is something that I think is a very cultural difference between what I've at least experienced in America versus other countries.
And we internalize it so much when we go into entrepreneurship. We like take in that same mindset when we really went into work for ourselves to have that time freedom, to have that flexibility, to have that creativity. And we can find ourselves feeling that pressure, especially if something's stalling or not going the way that we wanted to. We're like, oh no, I need to meet this deadline. I need to hit these metrics. I need to post. I need to do all the things so it shows that I'm proving that I'm doing everything that I can when it's actually I went into business with myself so that I could go to lunch in the middle of the day with a friend and have an
Yes.
hour and a half lunch break and wake up at 8 a.m. and have a slow morning. Like the trade offs that we make going from corporate 9 to 5 to entrepreneurship, as easy as it can be to fall into those old patterns, we have to remind ourselves that actually I went into this for the impact. I didn't go into this to make $3 million in a month. That's
Yeah. That's so, it's such a vanity metric too, right? To show how much money you made in a certain amount of time is the only reason people share that is because it makes them feel a sense of superiority or that they know more or more knowledgeable because those are values of America. How rich are you? Wealth? What class are you? What status are you? And so I think for me, it's also been hard because I hang out with a lot of Americans in Cape Town. And so there is still that element of the culture. And it's hard sometimes because I still default to the ways I was working in my sales job in Chicago. Like even last week during one of my therapy appointments, she was like, I think you just need to do less. I think you need to remove all these things. And I realized what I was doing was I was essentially making my self care a part time job. Of I need to be EFT tapping, journaling, writing 350 words. And it was like a 3 hour ordeal. And half of the things I didn't even want to do. But in my mind, I was like, this is what I'm optimizing everything. Like, I'm going to become a better human being. I'm going to have more status. I'm going to become more powerful from doing all these things. When in reality, I was drained, exhausted, resentful, totally out of energy. And I was wondering, why did I feel so constrained by my life that I've created? Like we're talking about right now, I create my schedule. I can choose what I want to do. So why am I always complaining about not having space? Yet when I have space, I fill it up with all these self care checklists. So I will say it's not something that I've completely mastered. It's something that I actively have to remind myself like, it's actually okay if you don't do 6 self care things every morning.
I also have not mastered it. So you are not alone in that process. I constantly go back. I'm like, okay, I wake up, I'm gotta check my email, do this. I'm like, Jasmine, relax. No one's on
Relax.
fire. Nothing's burning down. Nothing's happening right now. You can wake up,
Nothing.
have a bowl of oatmeal, sit with your dog, and then you can ease into your morning. But that burnout, that fatigue is what disconnects us from ourselves. That tiredness, that sense of urgency, it disconnects us so much. And then we end up in this hamster wheel. And then eventually we
Yes.
get so tired of the hamster wheel. We're like, oh, I didn't want this hamster wheel in the first place.
Yeah. And you know what book helped me so much with this that actually I'm trying to reread it because it blew my mind was 4,000 Weeks. And essentially the concept is that we all have 4,000 weeks to live. And so if you knew that, what would you actually prioritize? Because by the time you read this book, you're already like 1,700-ish weeks in or something. It's not to scare anybody. It's more to say, what is important? Do you want to look back at your life and be like, wow, I always had my inbox at zero? Or do you want to be like, I spent the best of my dog's years with him while I got to sit on the patio and have a bowl of oatmeal. That's the movie that I want to flash before my eyes, not, wow, she was on top of her inbox and an amazing worker. And it's just, that's not how I want to live. And he says something really cool that I think visually helped me a lot is that everything we do is like a conveyor belt. And we think that there's this oasis where our to dos are all done. Like one day, this inbox is going to be at zero. I'm going to have no tasks. All my life admin is 100% complete. And then I will feel this sense of relaxation. I finally did it. And this is why a lot of times people end up working over the weekends or putting 60-hour work weeks in or skipping dinner with a friend because they're like, if I just get this thing done, I will feel that oasis of peace. When in reality, almost everything you do is an input that is going to cause another output. So it's this conveyor belt of to dos. And I always look at emails now as a to do. So if I have 100 emails, I'm like, that's 100 tasks that I might have to do. So if I think of it that way, I'm like, do we need to do 100 tasks in the next 2 days? Probably not. Maybe we do 3 to 5 a day. And the conveyor belt visual really helped me understand like, the conveyor belt is always running. It's you deciding which dish do I want to take off the conveyor belt and actually eat.
Yep. I always tell clients who are trying to manage their anxiety, I'm like, there's going to always be something that has to be done. You don't need to do it all today. You don't need to try and get your list to zero because tomorrow there's going to be five more things. And that
Yeah.
feeling more comfortable with that space allows you to be able to enjoy the things that you are missing out on because you're constantly trying to have complete check marks, zero inbox, zero text messages,
Right.
unread. You're missing out on rest. You're missing out on spending time with friends, being present with friends, traveling, whatever fills your cup and brings you joy. That's the trade off that we make when we always try to meet this metric of completion.
And it's like you said, that usually isn't going to happen, that you have no tasks, no emails, no messages. And if you did, your default would probably to be create work because you're just not used to it because you've programmed yourself to constantly be looking for things to do and creating things. And that's what I've noticed is on the weekend, I put my Opal blocker on, which is just an app that blocks my social media and emails. And I put it on for 48 hours so that I don't even look at socials or emails over the weekend because I want to be present with my friends when I'm at the farmer's market or dinner or Pilates or whatever. And I still find myself almost creating things and pockets of time to be busy because my system is so used to equating like busyness with being valuable or busyness with being important or that people care about me or people haven't forgotten about me. I think there's a bit of maybe like an abandonment issue that I have or other people have where you think if someone hasn't texted you or emailed you or DM'd you that you've lost your entire tribe or friend group. When in reality, it's no, we're all just being present this weekend with our friends and family. And it doesn't mean that people have forgotten about you. That's a lesson I'm learning like in real time.
Yeah. For people who are only listening and not watching, Chelsea turned on a fan and she's having a full Beyonce moment right now where her hair is like waving in the wind with no motion. And so I just
It's
wanted to
so
point that
funny.
out.
Yeah, it is hot AF in my apartment. So the Beyonce moment is going to happen the next however many minutes we record.
Chelsea, this has been such an inspiring conversation. I think you've really hit the nail on what it means to redefine our vanity metrics. What does it mean to really sit with the idea of what success means and not just the American dream that we were sold and told, like, this is what should be important to you, but really sitting down and saying, okay, what is valuable to me? And what is actually valuable to me? What is going to allow me to wake up feeling motivated and excited about my day and not I have to hit this goal and constantly moving the goalpost. And I think you really reflect that in your lifestyle first, like focus career approach.
Thank you so much. And I want to give everyone a tip around that too, because I feel like we talked about it, but I know for me, I always like something practical is try to plug in your lifestyle things first and then schedule your work things. So, for example, one of the first things I do every week is I book all my workout classes because I usually do those with friends. Then I get a matcha and go for a walk, or I do that before. That goes in my calendar first. Then I start plugging in other things or my work blocks. I usually don't even have my availability on my scheduler open until past 12. So I know if I wake up in the morning, it doesn't matter. I'm literally not going to be speaking to anybody until past 12. So there's ways that you can start to play around with your schedule to make your lifestyle fit. It doesn't have to be oh, I need to get through all these things. And then if I have time, maybe I'll go do that yoga class. Or if I have time, hopefully I can squeeze in dinner. It's no, put the dinner on the calendar first and then plug in your work blocks around that. And that is how you start to build a lifestyle first career.
Do you have any offers that you want to promote?
So, Mic Drop is coming back as a live course. So, if you want to launch a podcast like Jasmine has, we are launching Mic Drop in, I think, the fall of 2025. Yeah, my summer sabbatical is slated for July and August, and that is going to be a place for me to create space and go inward and focus on my self expression. And then after that, we'll see. I'm cooking up a lot of offers, but I think there's always space to work with me one on one in certain capacities, whether that's a VIP day or a 6 month container. And then Pitch Perfect will probably be back in, I want to say late fall or winter. So stay tuned for that.
Everyone, Chelsea just let you all know ways you can connect with her, ways that you can work with her outside of finding her on her show, in my non-expert opinion. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining. This season, I am asking all of my guests as a closing question, what is your commitment to yourself for 2025?
Oh my gosh, this is something I should journal about. This is such a good question. I would say allowing myself rest and not feeling guilty about it. I think exactly what we've been talking about this whole time is rest as resistance. And as much as we can talk about it out loud, it's very different in practice. And it's something that I am actively working on right now is being okay with creating pockets of rest in my day and in my week and committing to that and going to bed earlier, taking the nap, sleeping in, whatever rest looks like, and not trying to push myself and prove anything to anybody. I don't want to operate with this energy of having a chip on my shoulder. And I think rest is the commitment and the solution that will help get me out of that energy.
I hope everyone goes and takes a nap after listening to this episode or watching a movie and turning your phone on Do Not Disturb. Thank you for tuning in to All Our Parts. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for tuning into this episode. Make sure you tap the bell to stay in the loop with new episodes dropping every Friday. If this episode spoke to you, I'd be so grateful if you left a review. It helps others find the show and reminds me why I keep showing up. And if you want to keep the conversation going, come hang with me on socials at Healing with Jasmine. We're healing out loud together.